Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the ADMA Best Practice in Customer Experience webinar, where we'll dive into the world of CX with our experts that draw from agency and brand backgrounds and first-hand experience in the UK, Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland, France, the USA, Canada, and Australia. In the spirit of reconciliation, ADMA acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Today's one-hour session covers a detailed discussion on what it means and what it takes to deliver a best-in-class customer experience for your brand. And we'd like to quickly check your CX maturity with a very quick poll. While you're answering that, let me tell you about questions. So you can ask the experts your CX questions. Use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen. Those questions will then go to the moderators to then be passed to the panel. The chat function isn't operational for this webinar, even though you might see it at the bottom of your screen. So let's see our starting point. So more of you are in a CX program than not. So there is lots to be talking about. And speaking of starting points, let's start the webinar. Please welcome the ADMA CEO, Andrea Martens. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, and welcome to ADMA's IQ Best Practice webinar series. And today's topic, as you've heard from Annette, is best practice in customer experience. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Andrea Martens, and I'm the CEO of ADMA. A special welcome to our ADMA members, and a big thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your busy days to invest in yourselves and your education and share in our passion for the marketing industry. As the principal industry body for data-driven marketing and advertising in Australia, ADMA's mission is to guide marketers of all career stages and provide them with marketing intelligence to keep them ahead of the curve. ADMA supports members with opportunities for education through in-person and online learning, networking events, advocacy with government and regulatory bodies. Additionally, as an industry association, we're committed to providing Australian marketers with the updates and resources to help expand their breadth of knowledge, both now and into the future. And that's what we have today. Now, in recent times, we are experiencing a changing marketing industry. And you could argue, actually, it's been for the last few years. More and more, we're seeing modern marketers looking to move beyond multi-channel marketing into a true omni-channel experience across all of their customers. In today's session, we would like to start to equip you with the right knowledge and skills so you can develop, lead, and optimize CX programs while having the skill set to approach the complexity of CX, both from a holistic business perspective and also through the lens of being a marketing leader. So we've invited two ADMA industry customer experience experts to guide you through some of the best practice that they've acquired over their many years in the industry, managing their CX programs for their own businesses and their clients. So now let's dive into best practice in customer experience. And I'd like to introduce our industry experts, Meyer and Simone Blakers. Alex is the former CMO for Australia's leading online fashion, sports and lifestyle retailer, The Iconic, and is now operating as a global chief customer officer, last in Canada and soon back on his way to Europe. During his time as CMO at The Iconic, Alex and his team focused on how to successfully connect the customer with brand through creativity, data-empowered decision-making and MarTech excellence. Simone Blakers is the founder of LiquidCX. She started in direct marketing and followed the rise of digital. Having led digital and CX agencies in both Australia and UK, working with clients on how to harness data and technology to enable a more memorable customer experience. Simone is also an ADMA subject matter expert, leading a number of programs for ADMA. Alex, Simone, firstly, thank you for joining me and our audience for today's session. We've got quite a bit to unpack around the CX as a topic, so let's dive straight in. I think it would be of value to start the discussion around how CX programs have become really critical in driving business success and successful outcomes for brands. And I want to delve into how that came to be. We've really seen a shift in control over to the customer with respect to how they engage with our brands, especially over the last 5 to 10 years. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around what has driven such a behavioural shift in how customers respond to brands and making their purchase decisions. So Alex, over to you first.
Well, thank you, Andrea. It's a pleasure to be here. And indeed, the world has changed in the last decade or so with if we think about it, more offers than ever, more content than ever, more channels for customers to interact with a company and a brand. And naturally, all of that gave more power to the customer. So I always think about it as C2B, the rise of C2B rather than B2C. And subsequently, I think strategically, we saw a move from the need of a more usual transactional customer relationship to a partnership-based customer relationship. And we've also seen businesses very successful if they acknowledge that we moved from a world of being supply-driven to demand-driven, or from a push model to a pull model. And subsequently, what it means is that businesses really need to react, going from tactical and reactive business flywheels to more methodical and smart business flywheels, where, for example, mass segmented and personalized experiences and communications become equally important.
Fantastic. I think that gives us a really good insight into some of the changes. I really like the concept of C2B and also that value exchange, because that's really what the customer has in terms of their expectations and at heart. Simone, over to you in terms of what you see in terms of the changes and what's driven some of these changes. I think you're on
Simone,
mute.
you're on mute.
That helps. Okay, so I was just saying I love that concept, Alex. I think it's such a great concept, and there's probably 3 things that I'm observing that are driving that underneath it. So firstly, necessity. Product commoditization is such a reality now for most industries. So what I'm seeing is that CX has actually become the new battleground, enabling brand differentiation where previously product would have done that. Secondly, I think the thing I'm observing is the rise of D2C. So, over the last 5 years, particularly with COVID, we've seen a shift of consumer goods product manufacturers being able to use e-commerce and sell directly to customers. And then the last thing underpinning it all for me is, that accessibility that we've now got to MarTech. This means that a connected experience is no longer in the realms of large enterprises. It's actually accessible to all sized businesses.
So that's quite a shift, and definitely from my experience in CPG space some time ago, but that is such a step forward in terms of being able to have those direct relationships with their customers. So really unlocking a huge amount of potential for that industry and those businesses. So now let's talk around the ingredients of what makes up the foundations of successful CX. Simone, as a consultant who lives and breathes CX on the ground every day in your role, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think if we start with a definition, Forrester defines CX so well. They talk about it as how customers perceive their interactions with your organization. And if we break that down, we need to recognize that, the term customer should be taken in its broadest sense. It could mean a student, a patient, a client, a subscriber, a donor. And we need to think about the broadest relationship that we've got with a customer as well in terms of that life cycle, whether they're a prospect, a future customer, or active or lost. So we do need to, in this definition, in thinking about the ingredients, consider customer in its broadest sense. And then we need to really understand, when Forrester talk about this idea of customers perceiving their interactions, this idea of perception is key, because what it recognizes is the reality that it is not inside the control of the business. The customer's experience is outside of your control. You can try and influence it, but their perceptions will be influenced by many things other than your advertising and your comms. They'll be framing the perception based on many other factors, and that's the reality that you're dealing with. So ultimately, how a customer experiences your brand is what we're focused on.
Love it. Thank you. Alex, is there anything you'd like to add? I know that you will have much to share on the role that brand plays within this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think brand is so important. And in essence, if you think about a brand, it simply is bigger than the sum of the assets of a company. And it includes all that halo effect that a brand has accumulated by all these interactions that Simone spoke about. And mental availability in a customer's mind of a brand makes, of course, everything easier when also trying to sell to a customer. But that's not just an awareness or consideration play. And one of the things that I've seen many businesses miss in the past is that it's really essential to build a good brand fundament in the business, meaning what is your brand positioning? What are your differentiators? Not just the one or two differentiators, but also the sum of the differentiators that make you really unique and differentiated in the market. What is your target audiences? What are the personas? What are the brand pillars, et cetera, et cetera? And too often these things are not aligned in a business. But if you do align them very well and you make sure that not the buying team is buying for one type of persona and the digital product team is building features for another type of persona, but that you really align strategically around the brand, then you can actually also build your brand and strategy into the micro moments of shopping. And so the one example that I always find so successful that we had at The Iconic was to say, sustainability was a key brand differentiator for us. We were one of the first who took it really serious in the fashion industry in Australia and set targets, published reports, bought different type of products. But a key differentiator for us then from a brand usability point of view was to say, how can we bring that into the actual shopping journey? And then we decided to bring a sustainability filter into the top of our whole filtering in the navigation. What that did is, in essence, it created more demand because customers all of a sudden didn't need to go out of their way to do good whilst they were shopping. Brands wanted to be part of it, but had to fulfill certain criteria to be even listed in that filter. And so what happens is, in essence, brand is always an output of all that you do. But then if you integrate it into your micro moments of shopping, it also becomes an input in that way that reiterates your strategic flywheel, in essence.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It really comes back to that piece that I think we've heard again and again, which is fundamentally the strategic foundations really do need to be in place. Because if they're not in place for the brand, then how we execute can actually end up with an experience for the customer that is completely misaligned. And that also, to your earlier point, understanding that customer really intimately and how the two interact is really critical. So thank you, really good insights there. There are so many decisions that marketers need to make with respect to customer experience program. However, as we've talked about, the foundations are around understanding the customer intimately. And part of that is leveraging the data that you have available across the business. And that may not automatically be just the data set that you play with on a daily basis. It may be actually much broader and looking at actually what sort of metrics you can use that will help not only tap into the insights from the customer's perspective, but it will also importantly drive the results that the business is looking for. So Simone, in terms of insights, what's your experience with insights and the role that data can play particularly in designing and managing successful CX?
Yeah, such an important foundation of all of this. I think if you're a CX specialist, you need to be curious. Like that's your number one skill is to be curious, and you need to look at all the inputs that are available to you. So that could be that you've got research, that maybe you've got customer surveys and feedback that's coming directly from customers. Maybe you've got access to data signals. Maybe you've got customer analytics. Maybe you've got channel and platform analytics. Like there's a whole range of inputs. And I think the opportunity for CX specialists is to really understand the role that each of these inputs can play. So we often talk about data analytics telling us what's going on, but research telling us why. So we see the behaviors, but we need to understand what are the drivers behind those behaviors. Other roles that you might think about when you're looking at this space is to think, okay, you're tracking Net Promoter Score or customer satisfaction as an overarching metric, or are you actually going to take it down a level into the micro moments and use it as a targetable trigger? So when we start to look at the role that data is playing, we've really got to start to break it down into what's right for your business. And there's no right or wrong answer, I guess. It really depends on the context of your business. There's not one rule, like we don't go, oh, this is the way it's done. Different organizations will have different budgets, different industries, different breadth in terms of their customers. So part of the skill lies in choosing which inputs are the right ones to unlock those insights, because ultimately we want to understand the customer's pain points and their decision drivers. If we think about how we take that data and move it forward, we want to turn it from information into actionable insight. And that insight might be, for example, say we're looking at customers' life stage, a young family versus empty nester. The kind of insight we get from that type of data might help us emotionally connect with them better. Or it might be insight where a customer is at within their purchase decision-making journey. And that might help us increase conversion by making it easier for them to achieve their goals. Or maybe it's about where the customer is at in their life cycle relationship with you. So recognizing that their value or tenure, if you reward that in the right way, could actually unlock some, lifetime potential. So I think there's a vast amount of data and insight available. It's about deciding what are the right things to inform the strategic decisions you've got to make.
No, absolutely. Alex, do you have anything to add, drawing on your time as CMO at the Iconic particularly, and how customer lifecycle played a role in designing the optimal CX whilst you were in that role?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. The one thing that I realized very early on and always hold on to is this idea of the micro moments of shopping. And I've come to this realization for me that digital is actually not a channel, but a mindset. And what I mean with that is that pure play never had the benefit of a logo or a window on the high street, which means you needed to really learn to dissect every moment of interaction with the customer, whether it's a non-linear journey or a funnel. You needed to optimize it all the time, because if it breaks somewhere, it doesn't go on to the next step maybe. Mm-hmm. And what that really does is when you identify these micro moments of shopping that really matter, and you know how to navigate between them or how to navigate customers from one to another, that type of learning you can apply in any type of business. It's almost a consulting approach to business, if you will, really looking at input levers to every step. And so what it really then meant in essence was transitioning data from being an enabler to being a strategic differentiator to drive a competitive advantage there. But then having said that, we always need to consider, and we saw that, of course, also with the Iconic, that shopping journeys are not linear. It can happen from an impulse, now, of course, in bricks and mortar businesses in the store, or from window shopping, or a trigger or a text message or a loyalty offer, or seeing an ad on Instagram or an influencer on TikTok or a drop on Twitter or a friend sending you a product link. And because you have all these different types of entry points or moving through points, it is important to actually build relationships with customers. And as Simone said, there are different life stages. So we often, for example, looked at the Iconic ad. Okay, our customer is a 20-year-old professional female in downtown Sydney, but at some point we realized a lot of them all of a sudden had babies, and they had families, and they moved into homes. And all of a sudden it was natural for us to create extension of adjacent categories, extensions and categories there that are adjacent to our offering, for example. But then we also realized different geo-realities. So Tasmania at the same time and the same week or the same month having completely different weather than Queensland, and all our advertisement was always initially focused on Sydney. So how do you work with that? And this goes back to this idea of inputs and outputs, understanding really what the input levers are. And what I would say is we developed a really good data-driven culture where I would funnily say we always held strong opinions, but loosely, so that we can, of course, with agility and flexibility adjust. And I would also say, especially when you as a business don't have a single customer touch point, where we sometimes were blessed at the Iconic that we were only pure play, which makes it a little bit easier. If you don't have that, even more so, it is important to have a single customer view to not miss key crucial components, because you will have situations where maybe an online customer seemingly has churned, and the online team thinks they have churned and sent them churn offers, but in reality they're constantly shopping in a store, and you might give contribution margin away for no reason, as an example.
Yeah, I think that's a really good insight. So assuming the stars are aligned and we have the right foundations in place and the insights to guide the way, I'd love to hear your approach on actually CX design. So Simone, what are some of the best practices that you draw on from when consulting with clients when designing differentiated, personalized omni-channel experiences?
Yeah, there was a great piece of Gartner research done recently that actually looked at the contributing factors for organizations that were exceeding executive expectations around their CX performance. And what they found was that those who were actively using tools such as personas and journey mapping for more than 3 years were having the biggest impact. So it's a really interesting view that sometimes we get so familiar with these ideas of personas and journey maps, and we forget how powerful the simple tools are. There's a corporate muscle memory that comes from using these best practice tools over and over again and evolving them and having them embedded in the organization. And I think when you've got those foundations, you can then move into using human-centered design techniques to unlock opportunities around the design of your experiences. And that can include things like problem framing, having ideation techniques such as role play and crazy eights, and prioritization techniques as well, to really understand impact and effort on the initiatives that you're wanting to do. And then before going to market, being in a habit of prototyping or creating minimum viable experiences that you can take to market in a really lo-fi way, just to sense check what's going on. So in terms of those design best practices, the companies that seem to be really in mode with it are doing all of those things and have that muscle memory around it. And ultimately at that design stage, they're looking to not just solve pain points and solve those pains, but they're also looking to provide gains through value creation. So the overall design of the experience is not just fixing things. So yeah, they're probably the best practices that I've observed.
And I'm sure it's in actually those gains and giving that extra experience rather than just solving the pain points that differentiation comes about, that ability to actually differentiate versus competitors and make it something memorable that the customer wants to consistently engage with. So fixing the basics important, but that extra tweak on what's going to make it a sensational experience aligned to your brand and the objectives that your brand's actually looking to deliver. Alex, have you got anything that you'd like to add? Maybe you could speak to the shift from traditional promotional offer to providing value that resonates with customers and delivers commercial results to the business, because that's a never-ending balancing act that needs to be played.
Yeah, so over time, I've developed a set of considerations that I really try to hold space for at all times and stress test decision-making against. Also considering, by the way, that of course, within the bucket of customer experience, all your interactions with the brand fall into, and some of them are technically related, some of them are creative related, marketing, digital products, some of them are loyalty program created or manifested manual tools of sorts. But the one key thing that I'm always trying to look at is really this idea of what drives revenue and profit. So especially in today's day and age where growth by all means is not the non plus ultra anymore, as we would say in German, but where profitability has become so vital, it is really worth always understanding how your initiative or investment into something that relates to customer experience drives revenue and profit at the same time, or how they relate with each other there. And so one of the things that I'm also always thinking about is this idea of how do you create win-win situations for different stakeholders that are touched by this experience. So I want to give you one example. You spoke about, or you asked about promotional offers. Of course, especially in crazy times, everybody goes on promotions. And who really has a problem with that? Well, in your B2B relationships, brands. And so brands, of course, don't want to see your website constantly on promotions and potentially don't give you certain product access because of that anymore. Well, instead of constant promotions, you could really work on personalized loyalty offers that are not visible to the full market. So that's something I'm thinking about. How do you create win-win? There's something for the customer. We can still drive through the sale, and the brand is happy that there's not a constant general mass promotion on the main window there. And then another one that I'm always thinking about, actually more and more throughout my career, is marketing science. So there is a lot of discussion around the long and the short of it. For the people who are listening now, if you want to follow on LinkedIn, people like Mark Ritson or Byron Sharp or Les Binet, they're all valuable anchor points of marketing science discussion in this world. And I'm always trying to see how can you really balance your investments, also based on the organizational size that you have, and of course based on the product that you're offering, but that you really invest ideally to this ratio of 60 into long-term brand and 40 into short-term sale, because it will have a much bigger impact down the line. And I'll just, if I may still mention two other points. One is on this idea of really use organic social as an anchor for your organic marketing model. It's a window into this topic of C2B. It's not only a window in terms of how do people react to a product that you push through. No, you can actually learn what is the demand that you can buy for. What is the creative that you can hone in on even more. So it is actually your free test and learn tool that can power almost the machine of your business by all means. Whether it is features or product or communication. So use organic social to actually test and learn what works and what doesn't, and what are people interested in, or what trends can we tap into or even create ourselves. And then lastly, I always call it the key destination strategy. When you offer multiple categories, be aware that people shop for different categories in a different way. And especially if you think about omni experiences, or even just pure play, every digital website has tried to copy the offline world in the past, instead of really working well together. And so what happened is you saw in multi-category retailers, for example, online, that a lot of businesses simply try to create the department store online, but that's not what works basically, because for sports product, you need really good sizing features. For beauty products, you need really good reviews. For a fashion trend, you need really trend relating creative as an example or so. So for home, you need something completely different again. And so every category has its own way of how people shop in it. And so under this idea of a key destination strategy, make sure that you always consider how do you design your proposition based on the shopping behavior in that category, rather than based on what you think you should present as a business overall on one side, so to speak.
Yeah, I love it. I think that comes back to that insight piece again, around really understanding the insights that are relevant to that category, to your brand operating within that category. And also the perspective on price. And prices and promotions can be a powerful but also a lethal weapon in terms of the ongoing price promotional strategy that brands can put in place. And that, in a way, is training the consumer to what the expectation and the value that they put around your products and put around your brands. By building in value in other ways, such as through the CX and being able to give value back to the customer, actually building strength and equity back into the brand as well. So I think some really interesting points there. So now I wanted to shift our discussion to the topic of execution and management. So more specifically, how the area of one big campaign launch once or twice a year has fast become a thing of the past, with an always on approach now becoming, at the end of the day, it's front and center for all marketers and business leaders alike. I'd really like to talk about that shift and how you approach to shifting from one of those big campaign strategies to a always on strategy. So Simone, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, Andrea, this is the thing that I find many businesses struggle with. And it's because of the mindset shift that needs to take place. It's like that there's a cultural transformation and a workflow transformation that underpins this shift from campaign to always on. Campaigns is a very marketing mindset as well. But if we think about experience in terms of sales and service, in terms of accessible channels, whenever the customer wants it, and we think about building relationships through conversations, we start to see that you have to have an always on program. These things have to happen in a very different way to just when you want to be talking about it as a business. Don't get me wrong, you need both. In fact, the best practice is to find the sweet spot with both working together. Because if we were to just rely on always on programs, it doesn't give us the reach and the volume. So, as Alex was talking about, we still need these big reach opportunities. So blending the two is important. An example of blending it, Alex, you talked about the organic social trends, understanding that and then leading that back up. So in other categories, we might see that you're doing proposition testing in social or search or even email, and then pushing that back up into a larger campaign. Or maybe you've got a monthly newsletter that's personalized and you can incorporate hero campaign messages down into it. Or maybe you're extending campaigns that you've got in market into a conversation that uses marketing automation. So the aim is to not say, turn all your campaigns off and shift everything to always on. We need that blend of the two. And I think one of the, probably one of the most important aspects of adopting always on is to really recognize that there's different reporting cycles and different longitudinal measurement practices where you're comparing week on week and month on month. So they'd be the key shifts for me.
Fantastic. Alex, I know you've got a breadth of experience to offer when speaking to always on programs. Any words of wisdom that you'd like to share specifically around measurement and optimization?
Yeah, a couple of things. I'm a fan of a word, my teams always make fun of it. I'm a big fan of the word triangulation. Mm-hmm. And to do that, my first advice to any marketing leader, product and tech is often further when it comes to that, but to any marketing leader, get a good data scientist into your marketing team. So I worked also now in my last gig with a world-class data scientist to really help triangulate the efforts and always on digital marketing. So for example, every digital marketeer works with the platform ROAS, but they're always overstated. Then every marketing team still has an attribution model, but they're not really showing the truth because they come with assumptions on a certain click. Either you accept last click, which is not the truth anyways, or you have a multi-click touch attribution model, which is arbitrary, decided on percentage points, or you have a data-driven attribution model, which often doesn't fully work because you're still missing a lot of data points that you get through an MMM model. So then a lot of people have MMM models, but in an MMM model, you often don't get the results daily, but only weeks later. And so how do you triangulate all of that? And so I always like to really spend a lot of time on that, to stress test all these points. And the best stress tester of all of them is incrementality testing, geo-incrementality testing. You have hypotheses, you say, I spend Google here, but not there. I do radio here, but not there. Comparable areas, you need to work that really out well. And you see the actual difference between hypotheses and result that you can then put back into your attribution model or into your MMM model. And over time, you have a really good triangulated understanding of all that's working well or not. On the customer side, do cohort analysis. Don't shy away from constantly looking at how customer cohorts behave. And also don't shy away from looking at acquisition existing customers and keeping them loyal, and reactivation of churn customers also at the same time. So I developed for my teams the best practice to say it's not just CAC, but it's also CRC for customer reactivation costs and CEC for customer existing costs to keep them existing. And so we looked at all of them, and all of them in relation to LTV. And then, as Simone said, you need these long comparable trend lines when you look at the different product funnel steps. Where is a drop off all of a sudden? Conversion dropped, or people putting less into their wish lists. And so for me, the best practice is, again, going back to what we spoke about now several times, which is this idea of the inputs, dissecting, understanding the inputs and looking at all of them, and not being afraid of the complexity that comes with it, in essence.
Yeah, love it. Thanks, Alex and Simone. What's really clear is there is a lot of complexity in designing, implementing, managing, and measuring effectiveness of CX programs, and doing it well. That's evident in some of the modelling that you've spoken to, Alex. I'm curious to hear from both of you. How do you get buy-in from senior stakeholders within the business in areas like budget investment? And then how do you go about reporting ROI? I think this is a challenge that marketers face in any area of spend, but I think it's important that we cover that off. So Alex, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, the most important one here is to align with the rest of the business. And, at the end of the day, you need to look at your strategy overall to basically start your assessment on capital allocation within your world, but then also in alignment with the rest of the business. You need to consider order profitability, customer profitability, maybe all these customer journey metrics that we spoke about, funnel metrics, channel performances, the addressable market, where are we over-penetrated, under-penetrated, payback ratios, and so on and so forth. And so I think why we see a bit of a development towards what is called the Chief Customer Officer role, that tries to bridge an umbrella across what is considered customer experience, is coming from businesses understanding that you need to really align on that. And so the way I talk about it is that you need to be aware of the incremental ROI of an initiative within your business, and congruence of other drivers and input levers that you want to invest into in the business. So whether you invest into advanced product filters, or membership programs, or expedited fulfillment, or payment options, or paid media, or social influencers, theoretically, that's all equally valuable to look at. And so what I would say there is, don't as a business, don't shy away from modeling equally across the business. And then in marketing specifically, don't shy away from not only looking at cost, but also, the spend, but also, the result that comes from your spend, but the actual cost also, so that you can compare, like the business normally looks also at CapEx investments. Why is that different in marketing? So my advice would be for any person and leader working in a CX environment, whether it's marketing or digital product as an example, or even customer service, model things like the rest of the business models things, so that the business can really decide together based on its strategy where to invest to. So that alignment becomes important, and it all starts again with brand and strategy, because then decision making becomes also easy. Does it fit to how we want to be perceived in the market?
Absolutely. And I think that comes back to marketers really understanding what are the metrics that the business is going after? What are the actual objectives at a strategic level? And marketing has a really important role to play in that, but needs to be aligned to that. And that makes the stakeholder conversations much, much easier as well. Simone, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important that stakeholders are actually recognizing customer experience needs to work together across so many different touch points in the business, different departments. And as Alex was talking about, that alignment is key, because not just alignment on objectives, but underneath, if we're seeing different departments have got incentives to meet different KPIs and personal bonuses and things like that, those types of structural realities in a business can undo any great customer experience strategy in a heartbeat. And the opportunity of moving beyond that infighting and chaos into having everybody aligned around a customer-centric idea of what those KPIs are and what that number one priority is really, really key. And then if we take that a step further into execution, I think unlocking cross-functional working across those different departments is really key as well. So the stakeholders need to accept that, you know, they're going to be having this cross-functional input, and, you know, there's a role and a skill set required of CX specialists to foster that collaboration, to be curious, to listen, to respect, to value the different personalities and expertise that can come from different departments, the data team, the tech team, the front of house team. All that expertise that comes to the table needs to be operationalized in a CX strategy. So with stakeholders aligned on that, then sometimes what you get down to is the working methodologies. So, you know, we often talk about agile working methodologies, and some people say that agile is an excuse for chaos. But in my experience, when it's done correctly, it's actually a very strict methodology that enables early cross-functional input and can be great for getting stakeholders aligned at an early stage. But Alex, I know you've had some different exposures to the strictness of Agile, so it'd be great to get your perspective on that one.
Yeah, our CEO at the Iconic at the time, Erica, and myself, we framed this phrase or this idea of that it's not waterfall or not agile, but it's hustle. And it comes from this question of agile is a great methodology if there is never an ego involved, which is sometimes hard in hierarchies in an organization. And so at the end of the day, we always just wanted to make sure that the dogma of the methodology doesn't overrule the common sense that sometimes comes with product leaders maybe not realizing how much experts with a gut experience of 20 years careers are product leaders by themselves. And so, as you said, the cross-collaborative idea that comes with the agile methodology needs to be picked up very early on and needs to be integrated there well. And I took it a step further, actually, in my last jobs in marketing. I always tried to build agile squads within the marketing teams as well that can connect to agile squads within the product and tech environments. So, for example, if we wanted to have a squad around a loyalty program or around the apparel category or the sport category, I would have maybe 2 social people, 2 designers, 1 brand marketeer, et cetera, be in a pod that can connect to buyers and product and tech leads to have autonomous decision making without being bogged down by the brand team or the social team or the CRM team that are maybe more functional experts where career development happens. So I think marketing can learn a lot there in terms of operating models with quick changes in methodology when needed.
Look, I think that cross-collaboration, I think that's a theme that we've had throughout this discussion, is the importance of cross-collaboration within the marketing team and the broader marketing team, but also across the business. with the other functions to truly align on that. So we're drawing closer to the end of the discussion. And before we take a few questions, perhaps we can hear your approach to the MarTech when building and managing CX programs. I do feel like I'm opening a bit of a can of worms here, but what steps should our audience consider when getting started with and selecting the right and most cost-efficient technology, which arguably we could talk about for days, but Alex, I'll kick off with you.
Yeah, so first, my mantra in all of this is scalable and modular. So this is a very personal thought and experience. My teams and I were never big fans of big black boxes, but rather use case oriented tools that really solve a problem in itself and don't hinder you from developing something else. And so we looked at this scalable modular approach where maybe we have a different CDP from a different CRM tool, from a different CMS tool, different ad tag from a different e-com platform. And what we realized is if you think about your e-com platform, whether it's Salesforce Commerce Cloud or Adobe or whatever it is, if you need to deplatform and change your other functionalities that you might have in that same world, it take forever to change because the platform itself is the most important piece. But in the meantime, you could have so many other good tools that really help you. And so what I usually do is I have literally a simple Excel sheet approach where we say, okay, for our purposes, what kind of tools do we need? What are the parameters they need to fulfill? Subsequently, okay, we need a new CRM platform. Well, within CRM platforms, you have 3 or 4. Which of the parameters that we need do they fulfill? What is the cost? And we really hone in on it under this idea, which is then the second big concept phrase that many of you will have heard before is build, buy, or borrow. And I would always say build when you have a strong technology team in-house. If the tool will contribute really to your IP or your strategy flywheel. If you don't have a really strong technology team in-house, then it is by nature probably better to buy, or in essence, also if it's not essential to the business to buy. But yes, it's a can of worms. There are 20,000 tools out there, and sometimes you have to start with assessing 3 based on suggestions from peers in the industry or other business partners, and so on and so forth.
Really helpful. Simone, over to you.
Oh my gosh. I mean, we could spend another hour just talking about this topic. So, you know, and I think the whole build, buy, or borrow AI is having a lot of impact in that question, in that, you know, you don't want to necessarily hand over the keys to something that's connected to everyone else's business. I mean, Google Analytics has been in that space for a while. I mean, I think probably just to round it out, because this will be a can of worms, strategy is always the starting point. So, you know, don't let the tail wag the dog. Steve Jobs, I think, said it best when he said, start with the customer experience and then work back to the technology. So exactly as Alex is saying, have your use cases, be really clear, and then determine what's the right technology. Quite often you need less tech than you think.
I think that's definitely a journey I've been on in a number of organizations, that all of a sudden you have all these fabulous shiny objects, and maybe we could do with a few less shiny objects just to enable the business to run efficiently and effectively and deliver the most amazing experience. We've covered so much ground. I can see we've got quite a few questions from our audience. We'll select a couple that we've got time for. And if we don't get to your question, we'll ensure that a member of the ADMA team will reach out and give you a response. So I'm going to start first with, there's so much data I could look at, but we don't have that kind of time. What's the minimum that I should be doing?
Kind of time or kind of budget?
Well, I mean, that's might be constraint of both time and budget. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, look, ultimately, even really small startups can still apply methodologies within the customer experience toolset, because you could just do very simple things like going and doing a service safari and going and doing competitor audits on their CX. Like, you don't necessarily have to invest a whole heap of time and budget, but time to me is different to budget, because I do think you want to do things properly. And sometimes taking the time to actually get under the skin of it, really understand the needs and wants and desires of your customers, put that first. It does take some time, but it doesn't necessarily have to take a whole heap of budget. So hopefully that answers the question.
And probably doing the foundational work saves time in the long run of having to unwind what has been done and then
Completely
different.
Yeah, and I would just add, like, it also depends really on the life stage of your business. If you are a young, fresh business that either creates a new type of category or is just very early in the business, customer acquisition is, of course, super important. Like, how much does it cost me to get customers? How many customers do I get? How many customers do I get by channel? If you're a very established business, it becomes naturally super important to then look at reactivation and keeping customers loyal, because your penetration within the market was quite high. People dropped off. It's almost the same as acquiring new customers, is to get certain people also back, because your pool of potential new customers gets smaller. So it really depends on the context of where your business is in, that decides what data to look at.
Yeah, no, good builds. Thank you. So we've got another one. This one's for you, Alex. Hi there. Could you please share the list of the people to follow?
Yeah, so I think it was answered in the chat.
Okay.
Mark Ritson, Byron Sharp, Lespinet. They're just three names who are really high regarded in the marketing industry worldwide and lead or are often quoted in a lot of the discussions going on. If you follow them, you will naturally get to others. They are good for different reasons there.
No, amazing. I've got another one that's come your way, which I'll quickly sneak in. You talked about market mix modeling. Could you?
Yeah, so I wrote the answer here. It's a multivariate regression model that in essence decomposes all the different inputs that lead to the success of your business, but it's done in hindsight. So it's a regression model that says, how much product did we have? What was our promotional grade? How much marketing did we spend? In what channel? What other things do we have that are growth levers? And then it looks over time, ideally over three-year periods, and says, okay, based on the spend in the last quarter, we can say this input, aka this marketing investment, or this amount of new product that came in, newness or width or depth or whatever, led to so much percentage in as part of your growth, basically. So the problem with it is in hindsight, but it's quite correct and strong if you have enough data for a long time. And there are software tools out there that can build this. If you have a good data scientist, you can build it in-house. Agencies offer this. It's quite expensive. And one of the challenges of why not every business can use it. But in itself, it's also not enough to steer your day-to-day business. That's why you still need an attribution model and or testing.
No, absolutely. Having used it a number of times in my Unilever days, very, very powerful tool across many categories. There was also a question that came through about what are the best practice tools that we recommend. And worth knowing, there's going to be a valuable resource to anyone who's attended this webinar, which talks about the 10 tips for leading successful CX programs. So that's a little bit of a bonus that will come following this session. So look, sadly, that is all we have time for. A big thank you, Alex and Simone, for taking us inside the bones of what makes up a winning customer experience program and how to best lead, manage, and optimize. We could talk on this topic for hours, and we could talk on the MarTech topic for days. Thank you so much also to the audience for carving time into your busy days to invest in your learning and development. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. And I'm now going to hand over to Annette, who's going to close out our session for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Simone, Alex, and Andrea, for sharing your knowledge and experience. We talked about many aspects to get CX right, and Alex even went into regression modeling, which is really getting detailed. So for all of you who are on the webinar, a quick poll: how do you feel about your skills? And while you're answering that, just know that the research shows that 1/3 of customers will leave your brand after a bad customer experience. So the stakes are high, and you might be thinking, how do I ensure my skills are up to the task? So I've given you a few minutes. So let's see where the level of skill is for the okay, so we have about 70-odd%, 75% still in that developing area. And that's a great place to be because there's lots to learn. And we'd suggest that updating the skills of the whole marketing team, whether you are at that developing your skills level or reasonably advanced, is important because it is a team sport after all. With the new ADMA CX certificate that starts in a fortnight, you can also save 25% as you improve your brand consistency and omni-channel excellence. So watch your inbox for how to claim your 25% discount, plus links to the additional CX resources, the 10 tips, and a link to the recording. Now, we couldn't have a CX webinar without doing something on CX ourselves. And in the spirit of CX insights, research, and feedback, we'd love for you to spend 2 minutes now to tell us what you thought of this webinar using the link in the chat. It's the only time it's going to work. And so if you go there, you will find a link. Your feedback will help us deliver the kind of experiences that matter most to you. So if you could take a moment and do that, that would be fantastic. We will leave it up for a couple of minutes, but thank you for joining us today. We're right on time. Have a great afternoon, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much.